Welcome to the deep dive. Forget the usual headlines. We're plunging into something truly unexpected today.
We really are.
We're dissecting the surprisingly parallel worlds of falling in love and, well, making investment decisions.
Right. And our intel comes straight from this really fascinating conversation between Tai Van Lin and Thuy Min on Vietcetera's Yelan YouTube channel.
Yeah, it's quite the source.
What's fascinating here, I think, is how these seemingly polar opposite experiences, the heart-fluttering chaos of new romance and the cool calculation of investment strategy, actually mirror each other in really fundamental ways.
How so?
Well, we're talking about how we size up potential, how we manage the inherent risks, and ultimately how we define what a successful outcome even looks like.
Exactly.
Huh.
So our mission today isn't just pointing out a few, cute similarities. We're trying to extract the essence of how falling in love actually unfolds, like Lin and Thuman discussed it.
And holding it up against the sharp light of investment principles and their own very personal journeys.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's unpack this. Where do these unexpected connections first sort of pop up?
Well, a logical starting point is probably the initial evaluation phase. Tai Van Lin, drawing on her, deep experience in venture capital, she offers this really compelling parallel.
Okay.
She describes that rapid-fire process of meeting tons of startups,
Right.
which allows her to develop this really keen sense of pattern recognition.
Right.
Within just like a minute or two, she often gets a pretty strong read on a founder's potential.
Wow. That's like speed dating on steroids, but for the business world. So how does that mirror finding love early on?
Precisely. I mean, when you meet a lot of people, you quickly start to identify patterns in what you're drawn to.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe even more crucially, what consistently doesn't resonate.
Oh. Okay. What you don't like.
Exactly.
Hmm.
It's about building this sort of mental model of your preferences through just exposure and experience. This rapid exposure, it forces you to confront your implicit biases and surface needs you maybe didn't even know you had. It's kind of like A/B testing potential partners to optimize for your personal relationship ROI.
Right, right. And Lynn also shared some personal relationship timelines, didn't she? 2 5-year relationships, then a shorter 2-year one. What did those durations tell her?
Yeah, those longer relationships, they provided really essential data points for Lynn, for understanding her fundamental dislikes and needs.
Okay.
So the second 5-year one, while it was stable, it revealed this desire for maybe something more dynamic.
More excitement.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah.
And then the subsequent 2-year relationship was, well, more volatile. Driven partly by conscious experimentation and a different dynamic, she playfully called it pilot and airplane, with her as the older partner.
Interesting. Which tees us up nicely for this idea of actively, disrupting your established patterns.
Yeah.
After those longer relationships, she made a deliberate shift. Right?
Exactly. It was a conscious effort to speed up the process of self-discovery and identifying a compatible life partner by intentionally breaking free from those previous time frames. This meant a more accelerated approach, more frequent, shorter coffee dates, just to quickly gauge if there was a fundamental connection.
Almost like diversifying an investment portfolio, but with people. Trying out different asset classes, business types, artistic types, different ages.
Yeah. And what's fascinating here is the direct parallel to, say, professional development.
Yeah.
Just like you gain deeper self-awareness through different kinds of career projects and roles,
Right.
you refine your understanding of your romantic needs and desires by actively engaging with a whole variety of people.
No, it's not just about our individual experiences filtering this, is it? We're also pretty heavily influenced by, societal blueprints, those ingrained narratives, like the princess waiting for a prince thing.
Oh, absolutely. Societal expectations, even, well-meaning parental influences, they can significantly shape our romantic choices, sometimes creating this tension between what we feel we should want and what actually truly fulfills us.
Lynn mentioned her own mother's impact, which actually sounded quite empowering, didn't it?
It did. Her mother instilled this really powerful belief in Lynn's capabilities and this conviction that she could achieve both, a successful career and a fulfilling marriage.
Wow.
With this sort of non-negotiable standard of not accepting anything below 100%. And it really highlights how those early influences can set the bar for our expectations later on.
And that leads us to a really crucial point. Knowing what you truly desire. Which, it sounds straightforward, but it's often surprisingly hard to pin down, isn't it?
It really is. Lynn shared a pretty stark statistic, actually, about high suicide rates among older East Asians in the U.S.
Oh, wow.
And one potential contributing factor being this experience of achieving all the externally defined success, only to find this, like, lack of personal fulfillment and direction.
That's a really sobering reminder, isn't it? The importance of identifying our own internal compass.
Absolutely. And Lynn's early realization, the need to define her own aspirations, supported by her mother, encouraging independent thought that was pivotal for her.
Yeah.
She even used the analogy of muscle memory for knowing what you want. It's a skill you have to hone through practice and experience.
Muscle memory. I like that.
Yeah, and think of it not just intellectually, but as an ingrained emotional response. Through repeated experiences, good and bad, you develop this intuitive sense of what feels right, what triggers discomfort. It's beyond a checklist.
It's a feeling.
It's recognizing subtle cues, that emotional resonance.
Like any valuable skill, yeah, it requires repetition, learning. And when you apply this clarity to projects, to decisions,
Yeah,
you just act more directly, more effectively.
exactly.
Okay, so you're out there meeting people, you're refining what you want. When does that deeper emotional investment really, well, kick in? What about that big I love you moment?
Ah, yeah. This was a point of real personal reflection for Thuy Minh.
Hmm.
She shared her own sort of internal wrestling match with the timing of expressing love. That push and pull between wanting to say, I love you, maybe early on, versus this perceived need to follow some unwritten rule about waiting longer.
She mentioned hesitating to say it even in a 5-year relationship. Because of this idealized, almost movie-like view of love, I think a lot of people can relate to that pressure.
Totally. And what's interesting is how her perspective evolved, recognizing that relationships just progress at their own pace. Sometimes the real red flag can actually be overthinking the timing itself.
How so?
You can end up creating the very anxieties and issues you're trying to avoid. It's about learning to tell the difference between that initial rush of novelty and, well, the gradual deepening of genuine affection.
Right. Distinguishing the fizz from the substance.
Uh,
So is love itself a form of investment? I mean, our title certainly suggests we think so.
the analogy to business investment really does offer a powerful lens here. You start with that initial due diligence, getting to know someone.
Checking them out.
Yeah. Then you assess compatibility,
Yeah.
looking at both the tangible numbers, shared values, lifestyle fit, and that intangible emotional connection.
But that order isn't always fixed, is it? Sometimes that initial spark, that attraction just ignites everything else first.
Exactly, just like in the investment world, right? You might be initially drawn to a company's amazing vision or a really charismatic founder,
Mm-hmm.
and that prompts the more rigorous deep dive into the financials, the team, all of that. Lynn's experience seeing the potential in the Viet Cetera founders early on, it's a great example of pattern recognition turning into a good investment.
And her reconnecting with her husband, Kevin, after, 10 years apart, that really highlights the importance of timing, doesn't it? Just like market conditions for an investment.
Absolutely. The fundamental pieces might be there, but the circumstances, the timing, it all needs to align for that investment to really take off and flourish.
Which brings us to the different time horizons involved. Long-term versus short-term investments in love.
Yeah, the parallel between long-term strategies like venture capital or just buy and hold stock market investing versus short-term stuff like day trading. It's quite insightful here.
How does that apply to relationships?
Well, engaging in shorter-term relationships can be a way to explore and understand your personal preferences, a bit like experimenting with different asset classes to figure out your risk tolerance and your investment style.
And it seems like maybe starting with those lower stakes investments when we're younger, casual friendships, school interactions, that makes a lot of sense.
It's about gradually increasing the risk as your self-awareness grows. As you get clearer about your long-term relationship goals, you don't usually jump straight into the highest risk category.
Right. Now, what happens when the capital of love gets depleted? Unlike a business, you can't just go find another round of funding, can you?
That's a really crucial distinction. When your love capital is low, your emotional reserves are just drained. The source for rebuilding is internal. Yes, it requires self-reflection, reconnecting with your own passions, rebuilding your self-esteem. And interestingly, increased self-confidence often makes you a more appealing investment to others anyway.
So love capital is like your emotional reserves, your ability to be vulnerable.
Exactly. And rebuilding it isn't just thinking. It's actively doing things that replenish your sense of self-worth and joy, hobbies, friends, personal growth. That makes you more resilient in relationships.
That makes perfect sense. Investing in yourself is totally foundational. Lynn also touched on recurring patterns in relationships, didn't she?
She did. And these patterns often stem from our subconscious desires, maybe unmet needs from the past. Breaking free from negative cycles takes a deep level of self-awareness.
Like spotting a flaw in your investment strategy.
Precisely. It's like someone who always finds fault in every situation, recognizing that pattern is the absolute first step towards changing it.
What about the often dreaded friend zone? How does that fit into our investment analogy? Is it just a bad investment?
Ha. Well, the friend zone could be likened to an investment opportunity where, okay, the fundamentals look good, shared interests, communication's great.
Yeah, ticks the boxes.
Right. But a critical component, let's call it the market sentiment or just basic romantic attraction, it's missing.
Ah,
And continuing to pour significant time and emotional energy into that kind of scenario,
right,
well, you risk falling into the sunk cost fallacy.
right. Clinging to it just because you've already put so much in, even if it's going nowhere romantically.
Exactly. It's a losing proposition in that specific way.
Okay. Now, here's a dynamic many people grapple with. Loving yourself versus loving another person. Lynn's partner playfully worried about being loved less than she loves herself.
Yeah, and this highlights a really vital balancing act. Prioritizing self-care isn't selfish. It's actually foundational for your own well-being and, crucially, your capacity to genuinely show up and care for others.
So it's not either.
Not at all.
Correct.
Consciously scheduling your life,
Yeah.
making time for work, health, your partner, kids if you have them, that demonstrates the commitment in a practical way.
It's kind of reframing self-care, isn't it? Recognizing that looking after your own needs actually lets you be a better partner, a better friend, a better parent.
Exactly. You bring your best self to the table. And even doing things like positive self-affirmations can be a tool here. Like shifting from thinking, I love my family, to consciously thinking, my family loves me.
Oh, interesting. Why that shift?
It subtly reminds you to act in ways that actually nurture that reciprocal love,
Mm-hmm.
to behave in a lovable way, essentially.
Huh. Okay. Now, the initial intensity of falling in love, it's powerful, undeniable,
Yeah.
but it's not the whole story for a lasting relationship, is it?
No, gosh, no. It's just the kickoff. Then there's the ongoing conscious decision to choose love every day, really.
Right.
There's that quote about being able to live perfectly well without someone, but actively choosing to be with them. That captures it beautifully, I think.
Lan's choice to really embrace independence in Vietnam after those shorter relationships, that seems to underscore this idea, getting solid on your own 2 feet first.
Definitely. By kind of releasing the perceived need for a partner and just being open to possibilities, she created the space, the conditions for her to then meet her current partner.
It's like the universe responds to that grounded self-confidence sometimes.
You can feel that way. Reflecting on those past anxieties about finding someone versus this shift towards proactive self-assuredness, it's a powerful change.
Now, let's talk about the rebound effect. Does that have an investment parallel? Maybe holding on to a stock you should sell.
Haha, maybe. In investing, it might be like not completely selling off a losing asset, keeping a tiny position just in case. But love. Love generally requires more clarity, more focus.
Yeah, juggling multiple serious emotional connections usually doesn't end well.
Rarely. So a rebound relationship often functions more like a temporary bridge, a way to process the loss of the previous one, maybe lick your wounds, but it's generally not a sustainable long-term strategy.
There's often that underlying uncertainty, isn't there? Like, what is my role in this person's life right now? Am I just a stopgap?
Precisely. That lack of clear definition is common.
Okay, what about the concept of give and take? That balance of effort seems crucial for long-term relationship health.
Oh, absolutely fundamental. Challenging that old idea that you're happier if you're loved more than you love. That's essential.
I challenge that. Sounds nice to be adored.
It might sound nice short-term, but long-term success really seems to need a genuine 50-50 effort, a mutual investment of energy, care, attention, especially when big life changes happen, like having kids. You need that strong, balanced foundation.
Right, because the demands shift dramatically then. What about those unrequited investments in love? You're putting in the effort, the energy, but the other person just isn't interested romantically.
Yeah, that's tough. It's analogous to investors wanting to pour capital into a company that, well, simply isn't looking for funding or already has other backers lined up.
So what do you do? In investing, sometimes patience pays off, right? Waiting for the company to grow or need funds later.
Sometimes, yes. Patience can be a virtue in specific investment scenarios. But in romance, the likelihood of feelings suddenly being reciprocated after a clear initial lack of romantic interest, it's generally lower, I'd say.
Timing again.
It really
Does seem critical in both arenas.
It really is. And while You might hold on to, a soft spot or fond memories of past connections, and we can clearly love multiple people deeply, like family arena. The path of romantic relationships is usually less about just waiting for the right moment with someone specific,
And more about.
more about mutual growth,
Mm.
shared connection in the present, and recognizing that even if you deeply cared for someone, you've both grown, and what you want now might be different.
That makes sense. Holding on to a soft spot is different from actively waiting for something unlikely to happen. So, what are some key red flags then? Things to watch out for when you're falling or when you're evaluating an investment.
Well, in the business world, excessive egoism in founders is a huge red flag.
Right.
Someone who doesn't listen thinks they know everything. And similar tendencies show up in relationships, don't they? A lack of empathy, a disregard for your perspective. Those are major warning signs.
And the friend zone we talked about,
Huh?
that's a flag for the lack of romantic chemistry, even if other things line up.
Exactly, that fundamental incompatibility on the romantic level.
Hmm.
And that initial spark, that gut feeling, whether it's attraction to a person or excitement about a company's potential, that's also a crucial indicator, positive or negative. Don't ignore it.
It really all seems to circle back to self-awareness, doesn't it? But are there potential pitfalls to prioritizing self-love within a relationship? We touched on the partner's playful fear.
Right, the do you love yourself more than me
Yeah.
concern. It's a valid point to acknowledge, absolutely. But again, prioritizing self-love isn't about excluding the partner. It's about cultivating your best self for the relationship and for your own happiness.
So how do you reassure a partner?
Open communication is key. Talking about your needs, your priorities, why self-care matters to you.
Hmm.
And crucially, demonstrating your care and commitment through your actions, consistently showing up for them.
Actions speak louder than words.
They really do. And using those positive affirmations we mentioned earlier, they can be a tool for self-reflection, guiding your actions towards being a loving and present partner, even while you're taking care of yourself.
Wow. This has truly been a fascinating deep dive. I mean, who would have thought that the principles guiding venture capital could offer such, well, insightful perspectives on the often messy, unpredictable world of human relationships?
It's quite remarkable, isn't it, how these seemingly disparate fields actually illuminate these fundamental human tendencies, how we evaluate opportunities, how we manage risk, how we strive for meaningful connections.
Whether those connections are measured in financial returns or, emotional fulfillment.
Exactly. The underlying processes have surprising overlaps.
So the key takeaway for you, our listener, seems to be the profound significance of self-awareness, learning from every experience, the wins and the heartaches.
Not annoying.
And that ongoing process of thoughtfully evaluating your investments across all parts of your life, but especially in love.
Which really raises a final thought for you to maybe ponder. What are your own implicit investment strategies when it comes to relationships? Are they truly aligned with your deepest desires, your long-term goals for connection?
That's a great question. Are you maybe focusing too much on short-term gains, or are you actively building that resilient foundation for something lasting and truly meaningful?
It's something to think about. Where are you placing your most valuable capital?